What's up, Cubers? This is Jeremy. You can actually see my face this time. I'm a real person. Isn't it nice? And I got a little treat for you guys. Um, Something different than just a regular preliminary coverage video. And if you notice, I'm not alone. I got Vic here with me.
Hey,
Hey,
I'm Vic.
uh, yeah, CJ, and we're going to go over some of the best cards that we think is in the queue. But before we jump into that, Vic, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, what your background in Magic, like who you are, like for the
I,
people who
I'm
don't know you're a limited monster and why you're here.
yep.
Yeah,
I'm Vic. I'm not a pro player or anything, but I had years where I paid my rent and off of MTGO winnings, and I played a lot of Cube, thousands and thousands of Cube drafts since they added it on MTGO, and I've hit 2,000 MTGO rating a few times. Had 20,000 play points not long ago. And yeah, I love the format. I think it's the best format. And I've played a lot of it and play with very good people.
yeah, and
And
I think that's probably mostly with like the vintage cube, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
look, good.
Vintage Cube. I love Legacy Cube, Modern Cube, but Vintage Cube is kind of what people like on Magic Online, so they keep bringing it back.
Yeah, no, and it's one of my personal favorite formats too, and it's how I got started with the cube as well. Playing playing on MTGO and playing on with my friend's paper cube or paper vintage cube that we had a
Yeah,
number of years ago as well, and it became my favorite format as to which led me to create the league today. What would you say like the difference between you've played my cube as well,
yeah.
which is a modern cube. Aside from like fast mana and combos and stuff, would you say like some of that uh, vintage cube skill would translate over to this modern cube?
Yeah, the fast mana is of course is a huge difference. There's nothing like Storm,
Mm.
and especially over the last 3 or 4 years, one of the biggest aspects of Vintage Cube has been the new broken commander cards,
Right.
and this cube is missing those like Broadside Bombardier, Mix and Boo, where you're just trying to force those out at 3 and 4 and run over people. And this cube, you don't have that, which it has good and bad things. It's kind of nice to not have those really,
Yeah,
where
those
someone
cards.
just
Yeah, those cards were designed for multiplayer formats,
yeah,
not the 1v1, and that lends to how broken that they really are in the
yeah,
vintage cube is because they just simply weren't designed to be played the way that we play with them in the vintage cube.
yeah,
So yeah, my cube is definitely more fair than that.
for sure.
And I think that because it's a little bit more fair, and those broken pieces aren't part of it, I think that makes my cube maybe a little bit more beginner friendly than say the vintage cube is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I know like Cedric Phillips did a poll of what would you take, Broadside Bombardier or Oko?
Mm.
And on Twitter, it was basically 50-50. And yeah, anyone that's played a lot of Cube, Broadside's a much stronger card. But because of Oko's reputation, anybody that's not a huge Cube player is going to take that.
Yeah, that's
And I
definitely a
think,
misnomer. Yeah.
yeah, I think your Cube it lets people go by reputation a little more than some of these without these busted commander cards, basically that people just aren't familiar with.
Yeah, I agree. So let's jump into the list here of what you got. Um, so it looks like we've organized, or you have organized your list into four different categories here. It looks like we've got
Yeah,
the best in the cube. We've got fetches, which are kind of in their own category in itself. Uh, Decent first picks or good first picks, and then just cards that are just and fine
yep.
fine picks. So let's start off with like the what do you think the best cards
Okay.
in my cube are? Um, and we can just go right down the list here and tell me what you think. So
Okay. Yep.
at the
Sounds good.
yeah at the very top, it looks like we got the One Ring.
Yeah, the One Ring. It's it may not be the strongest card in the cube, but of the strongest cards, it's colorless. Every deck you play, no matter what happens in the rest of the draft, you're going to play the One Ring.
Yeah, for
And
sure. Yeah, so like I think a lot of people think about the One Ring that was recently banned from Modern and how we played with it in Modern,
yep,
and I think the way that we kind of can think of the One Ring or the idea of what it is that it's good for when you're behind, in that it's going to buy you maybe that extra turn of immunity and then draw you the cards to kind of turn the corner in the game. But maybe what some people don't initially think about is how powerful it is when you're actually ahead as
yeah.
well.
If you're ahead, say a red aggro or a white aggro, and a control player has to keep defending, you get one card, then two cards, then three cards. They won't have the answers for all of those. And so if you just take that, any deck that you play, it's going to be great. Any of the green decks where you have Birds of Paradise or Elves and you can power it out early, it's just it's great everywhere. And it's colorless, so every deck plays it.
Yeah, so let's stop for a second, and we just talked about how the One Ring is good when you're behind and when you're ahead. When you're coming up with a list like this as to what the best cards are, um, what kind of heuristics are you looking at a card as to what makes it the best of the best?
Um I'm looking at a few things. One is casting cost is huge.
Sure.
Like problem with many players cubes decks is there's a lot of really good cards at 3 and 4 mana. Like I think Ragavant's near the top two,
Mm.
and at 1 mana you can have as many good 1 mana cards as you want because you can always cast 1 mana cards, and so casting cost is just huge for me.
Yeah, I agree. The way that Modern Magic tends to play out in limited formats as well is that we're cards of higher power levels are getting more and more aggressively costed.
Yeah,
And I think the way that we used to evaluate cards would be into what we called quadrant theory, right? Where we would look at a card and we would think, what kind of situations is this card going to be good in different phases of the game? Is it going to be good when I'm ahead? Is it going to be good when I'm behind? Is it going to be good when I'm at parity? And where that kind of fits along the spectrum of to where it is. But that might not be quite how things are anymore, right?
yeah, yeah, in cube especially, you're trying to snowball most of the time. You're trying
Mm.
to get a big advantage that they can't come back from. And sure, it's nice to have a few things for defense, but just trying to put a curve and put a game plan that your opponent just can't come back from is usually going to be your best case to win a lot.
Yeah, and looking down your list, you've got Ragavan right underneath the
Yeah,
One Ring. Um, Such a snowbally card, right?
yeah. It's a 1 mana card that if they don't answer, you're going to win. And I think, like, of course, in mono red, Ragavant's great. In white red, it's great. In blue red, you can back it up with counter spells. In black red, you're backing it up with things like Bot Seas, which is a little lower on my list, but also a very good card.
Sure, sure. Um, yeah, I mean, I've won a lot of Magic with Ragavan
Yeah,
in different formats.
yeah,
It's definitely one of my favorite cards in the cube.
yes.
Uh, but you mentioned a little bit about defense. Looks like in your number three spot, you got Fury.
Yeah, Fury's it's not just defense though. Fury you play your attackers and they play blockers, then you could Fury them out of there. Or you could Fury and bring it back. It's Fury's just very valuable card. Most cube decks, especially in this cube, play to the board, and Fury is going to get you multiple things for usually for free, or you'll play it for 5 and it'll get you multiple things and a 6 damage creature.
Yeah, I mean it's could be a one-sided board wipe in like the
Yeah,
best case scenarios if you're playing like against a token deck or a lot
yeah,
of creatures with the one toughness
yeah,
um, for that. And yeah, the being able to there's not much more of an aggressively costed card than free if
yeah,
you gotta do it for that. So yeah, Fury is definitely a a first pickable, very valuable card.
yeah. It's one of the strongest cards in the cube for sure.
Yeah, and moving right along, not pushing a lot of damage, but you've got Tamio up
Yeah,
there.
it's 1 mana. It's like Ragavan, and it's kind of a similar thing. If they let you keep attacking with it, it's just too much advantage. You get clues. It's fairly easy to flip
Yeah, and
other
the flip
cards
side
in
is
the
super powerful too. Yeah,
yeah, and it combines well with cards like Jace the Mind Sculptor that or let you flip it easily
but the One Ring.
without even tracking the clues. Or Urza.
Yeah, yeah,
Urza turns those clues into mana
sure.
and then holding down your opponent's defenses while you just gain huge amount of cards
Yeah, and
is
there's also with Tamio, there's a lot of artifact synergy cards. When an
yeah,
artifact enters the battlefield, make something happen, generate some card
yeah,
advantage, or like uh we've got Kappa Cannoneer in
yeah,
the
yeah.
in the cube
It's
as well. So it
yeah,
it can be
it's
a
great
cornerstone
for
piece.
many
Yeah.
and everything on this first category. They're good in almost every deck in that color. That's the main thing that they have going for them.
Yeah, so you don't have to draft the artifact deck that I just talked
No,
about in
no,
order to make Tamio good.
yeah, any tempo decks, even if you're combining it with like Tameo and lightning bolts, just bringing back lightning bolts and killing more of your opponent's creatures. It's 1 mana and they can't let it get out of control or it just wins the game on its own.
Absolutely. I love that card too. Um, yes, in the same moving down the line, it's like in the same vein as Fury, we've got Solitude.
Yeah, Solitude, it's a little different than Fury. It does, but it's nice. It stops combo decks.
Mm.
It's very fair. It stops an early Ragavan, stops an early Tameo, and then it's just great when played fairly. A 3/2 lifelinker. If you are in the controlling decks, it gets you back in the game, taking out one creature and then doing that, and it synergizes with other good cards in the cube like Ephemerate.
Yeah, being able to blink these things is super powerful, and it's
Yeah,
worth noting that this is exile removal too, right?
yeah,
So like if you do get comboed off on, and
yeah,
it's going to stop anybody from getting back into it. Like you're not going to want to do it, but you can get rid of a Marit Lodge token with with
yeah. Could get
Solitude.
rid of Merit. You could get rid of Archon of Cruelty.
Sure, sure.
If I saw in week one, patch one with a Nadu deck,
Yeah,
being able to tap out and take out Nadu is probably the only thing that's getting you back in that game.
and I think that's exactly what Ricky did in that
Yeah,
championship round. Was
yeah,
that's how he got the one win that he did was with Solitude.
yeah. It's just a great all around creature.
Mm. Um, so up higher here, we also have Orcish Bowmasters.
Yeah, Orcish Bowmasters. It's just very big mana for or very big value for 2 mana. It's good against Tameo. It's good against Ragavan. Like it's good against the other things, and it just sits very nicely on your curve, played with synergies or without synergies.
Mm. Yeah, I think I agree that most of its value lies in that it is a good value answer for these other top tier one drops,
Yeah,
right? That's really where it comes in. Like, I think it could in like say the Vintage Cube, for example, Bowmasters can be
yeah,
a bit more of a build around where it's going to
yeah.
do a lot more.
In Vintage Cube, you're playing it with wheels, and like
Sure.
it's really a good offensive tool.
Mm,
But this is just a removal, 2 bodies, for 2 mana, and then for the chance to add even more later is it's just a lot of things for 2 mana,
Yeah.
and it goes everywhere. So maybe you have a sacrifice deck, and you get sacrifice synergies. It's great with Skull Clamp.
Oh yeah, for
It
sure.
just it does a lot of things, and for just 2 mana,
And it's good versus Skull Clamp too.
yeah, good versus Skull Clamp.
Yeah, and no, I think it's good. I think the sacrifice synergies is good to bring up with that because
Yep.
getting that extra little body and then getting that added value. If you can turn Orcish Bowmasters into a removal spell plus any other little thing, it's you're going to gain value over the longer game, and I think that's
Yeah,
very important in the cube too, is to have those
and
types of engines.
with how powerful the aggro decks, it's very nice to just gum up the board while you're
Mm,
doing your plan, even if it's not doing anything huge. It does a lot.
sure. Speaking of high value 2 mana plays, we got Failure
Yeah,
right after.
Failure is it's a very good card as people are just now discovering in modern. It seems like with so many with modern Magic kind of being about enter the battlefield abilities,
Mm,
Failure just consistently gets you big value. And then there's also a decent amount of tokens that you can blink out of play. Someone has a Merit Lage or their Bowmaster token, just making it disappear sometimes is really good.
sure. I mean, and that's playing with Failure barely,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
fairly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
even
So
on
like,
top of and
if
then the
it,
overlords that
oh
you can
yeah, yeah,
just get huge abilities for. It's another 2 mana creature, does a ton of things.
yeah. We've got Overlord of the Boiler Bilges.
Yeah.
We've got uh all of them in the play, and most of them do
Yeah.
have in the battlefield abilities. And like stacking up with the cards that we have on the list of what you said was some of our top cards,
Yeah.
blinking
Fury,
something like
Solitude every turn.
yeah, Solitude, Fury, Bowmasters,
Yeah,
anything like
Bowmaster.
that, or you know, one of the drawback of the One Ring in the cube are those burden counters, right? And
Yeah, that's true.
they're gonna hit you every turn, and like
Yeah,
the reason that got banned out of modern is because we could stack the One Ring over and over again.
that's true.
But if we
Yeah.
got Failure, we can blink the One Ring and
Yeah. You give yourself
reset it.
protection again.
Well, you don't get the protection again because it
Oh yeah,
says
you
when you
don't get the
cast.
protection, you
Yeah,
just
yeah,
get you reset it, but
yeah. But you can save
it's
yourself from dying. Yeah,
yeah, it's very powerful. It's a card that doesn't always look like that much, but it's always doing big things when you're playing it fairly. And
mm,
then with these huge things like Overlords, it does great. It's a combo piece.
yeah. Um, Next on your list is one of my favorite cards, which is Fable the Mirror Breaker.
Yeah, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, I think you could make a case it's the strongest red card in the cube,
Mm,
even stronger than Fury or Ragavan. And the only thing that holds it back from being above those is there's a lot of other good 3 mana red cards.
sure.
But yeah, making a creature that gets a treasure, discarding for a reanimator deck or any other synergies, or say turn it on Tameo, and then the flip side, letting you make another Fury or Solitude or Grief or Bowmaster or anything is just very powerful. Much
Yeah,
like,
or if you're in the right deck, you can make another copy of Fear of Missing Out or Zealous
yeah,
Conscripts
yeah, it's great.
or anything like
It
that.
worked. Yeah, NT is the
Sure, I mean, yeah, and
yeah,
it could do a it could. I mean, it literally does a bad Kiki Jiki impression, right? Too. So
yeah,
if you're in the Deceiver Exarch or Pestermite deck,
yeah,
it can do some seriously broken things. And this is all on one card. This is, I
yeah.
mean,
It's just a crazy amount of value.
yeah, like
The the only the
I
only
think
thing that keeps it from being the top is the casting cost.
which if it cost any cheaper, it would be
Yeah,
it couldn't. Well,
yeah,
never say never the way that things
mhm,
are now, but
yeah,
it's absolutely you, you can't find much or maybe not any better ways to spend 3 mana.
yeah. That's
Um,
for sure.
But because cards like Fable and Mirror Breaker do so much on one card, I think that's
Yeah.
why our next card, Thoughtseize, can be
Yeah.
such a high pick, right?
Thoughtseize, besides just doing that, Cube is a much more fragile format than something like Modern or Legacy because you have the one ofs and a lot. I mean, people draft shaky decks, and sometimes people you can thought seize someone and a hand just falls apart to a thought seize.
Mm.
Maybe they have a mana dork and then a bunch of things that cost 3 or 4. Maybe they have a combo piece that turn one thought seize will sometimes just win you the game.
Yeah, I think like in Cube and really in really any other format that you're looking to cast Thoughtseize, I probably casted this card maybe more than any other card in Magic, in my opinion, just from
Yeah.
the way that I built decks ever since this card came out. It's a really skill testing card where your familiarity with things like what the most powerful cards is in this list that we're going
Mhm.
over right now, if you have that knowledge with you as you're going into it and you draft a card like Thoughtseize, I think that type of information, background information, is going to help you get the most
Yeah.
out of this card.
Yeah. Knowledge is important with the card, but like it's really hard to understate just how fragile some people's hands are
Mm.
in cube. Like there's so many cube hands that just they fall apart to a Thoughtseize, yeah, it'll have a huge impact. Maybe they only have one thing low. Maybe they only have one big thing,
Mm.
and then the hand just has a bunch of mana dorks that don't really do anything. And it's just it without the consistency of having 4 of the cards in cube, you could just sometimes just destroy someone's game plan with it.
Yeah, and it can be a good tempo play too, right? So
Yeah,
like um, if there are copies of something like say a key piece of removal or counter magic that you need to clear the way for in order to land your own combo, or
yeah, for
to
sure.
to grab that key removal spell to make sure that the Ragavan you have in your hand is going to be able to be dashed in, or
Yeah,
to hit. Thoughtseize is a great way to finding that out too.
yeah. Or like if you taking out a blocker for one of the 1 mana spells that you've listed, or I think there's another one coming soon. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. The next card on your list is actually Skull Clamp. So I think this is more of an engine piece than
okay, yeah,
anything, right?
Skull
Yeah,
Clamp.
yeah, sure,
But yeah, taking out the removal for that just Thoughtseize is good offensively, good defensively. It's one of the strongest turn one plays.
absolutely. Well, talk to me about Skull Clamp. Like, what kind of deck are you using Skull Clamp in,
Um,
and what is it going
Skull Clamp is the white and red are the two great aggro colors in the cube,
to? Mm-hmm.
and it's good for just snowballing with either of those with creatures that have kind of outlasted their usefulness. Like if you have a Ragavan once the board gets gummed up, Skull Clamp it away, get 2 cards.
Sure.
It's also great in Nadu, which I think is becoming the premier combo deck of your cube.
One of, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's great with mana dorks. Once you have enough mana that you don't need the dorks, it's good in very many places. It's not as maybe universally applicable as some of the other cards in this first category, but in the decks it's good and it's very very good, and it's banned in legacy for a reason.
Yeah, it is. And I obviously what it does is draw cards, and
Yeah,
that's something to push. But that extra little piece of power that it can
yeah,
get on a creature that can handle the -1, that's not nothing sometimes
yeah,
too. You could find yourself in a situation where turning your 2 power attacker into a 3 power could really matter.
yeah, and especially if it trades with them.
Yeah.
Say if it does trade with their 3/3, then you're in a great position to
Oh,
keep
yeah.
drawing cards.
Yeah, happy to do that anytime.
Yeah,
Um, the next card is another one of these really powerful 1 drops, and I think that some people could make an argument that might be one of the better or the best one drop is Ocelot Pride.
Yeah, it's Ocelot Pride is the same thing as Ragavan or Tameo. It's just in white. It's a one drop that if they don't answer it and they let it get out of hand, it will win the game on its own.
Okay, let me put you on the spot for a minute. Let's say you've got a mana confluence, you've got a rainbow color deck, you don't know what's going. You've got Ocelot Pride, Tameo, and Ragavan, all three in your hand. What card are you
Um,
casting?
I'm casting Ragavan.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
exactly.
casting Ragavan.
Sure.
It's the with modern Magic. I mean, one ones are good, but
Mhm.
you'd rather have the treasures.
Sure. So that means like if you open a pack and all three of those are in it, you're taking Ragavan over
Yeah,
Tameo, over Ocelot Pride.
I mean, Ragavan and Tammy are closer. Those two I could see just going by what you want. I mean, Cube in general, like this is a little side tangent, but what is good in Cube is less important than what the other people around you think is good. Like the best is way less important than what is the most underrated.
Mm,
So if you have other people around you that you know like Red, take the Tamio over the Ragavan. It's fine.
sure.
But I think Tamio and Ragavan are both above Ocelot Pride, but it's not far beneath each of those.
Yeah. So like, yeah, it's good to know your opponents and what their draft
Yeah.
tendencies are whenever you're taking
Yeah.
it
Like
is.
it's when people talk about what they like listen to that and you go with see where you disagree and
Mm,
where you can prove them wrong.
yeah.
Like,
I
like,
that's good. That's a good a good perspective onto it.
yeah.
Um, next up we've got a Johnny, the 2 mana flipwalker.
Yeah. Johnny is somewhat like Bowmasters.
Sure.
And it provides a lot of things for 2 mana. Two creatures like Bowmasters, but with more power and toughness. And if you could get rid of your cat with, say, a Skull Clamp or a Goblin Bombardment or any other way to do it, Johnny just keeps giving you removal and creatures and just gets out of hand.
Yeah, getting that red permanent. So you definitely want it in more of a red white deck, like it's played
Yeah.
in
But
that.
you,
But you
you,
you played in
you
anything,
want
right?
it. Yeah, you want it in a red white deck, but just even mono white, just 3 power of and 3 toughness. So for 2 mana on two ability bodies is huge.
Sure. Yeah, it's in a vacuum.
Yeah, even without where when it's not at its best, it's still very good.
Yeah, so let's move on to like maybe a less thought about problem or topic for like maybe someone who's kind of new to Cube, and that's the value of mana fixing and these fetch
Yeah.
lands.
So fetch lands are, I mean, they're one of the best things to be doing. If it's not obviously the best thing in the cube, which are the cards in the first category, take a fetch land.
Hmm.
In many ways, it's kind of like going to a club and imagine that there's just 10 girls in the club and a
Okay,
lot of guys.
all right.
That's kind of what fetch lands are, but with shock lands and triomes and surveil lands. There's many things that pair with fetch lands, but there's only one fetch land. There's only these and many things that pair with it.
Okay, I'm not sure I 100% follow your metaphor,
Okay,
but I
but
gotta go with you
so
say
but it's like you want the fetch lands and you want things that fetch lands can grab.
for sure.
That's your thing, but there's only one cycle of fetch lands. There's
Hmm.
many cycles fetch lands can grab.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, and getting those, you know, you have them all kind of like lumped together as like maybe
Yeah.
there's not a single fetch land that's
Yeah.
above any of
I,
the others.
I mean, I'd take what I think are the best color combinations, but whatever you're comfortable with drafting, they're just very powerful. And they're a very safe first pick.
Hmm.
Because like if you draft say Bloodstained Mire,
Hmm.
if you have black or red in your deck at all, you're playing Bloodstained Mire.
Right.
But it could be black green, it could be red white. Like it's a very high percentage chance it's being played.
Yeah, and I don't think it'd be overemphasized as to how much this kind of keeps you open whenever you take one of
Yeah,
these things early on, right? Because
yeah,
like
like
with the shocklands and with the triomes in the cube, turning your one red fetch land, that might be able to
yeah,
turn on your red green from your shock or
yeah. It's
your
anything that it
yeah.
could grab.
Yeah. So like it's able to kind of like make you continuously branch out
Yeah,
into giving you the ability to pick whatever the most powerful card is
yep,
in the cube. Like let's say you first pick that Bloodstain Mire
yep.
that you want, but then someone passes you a Johnny, right? And you're
Yeah,
thinking like,
you could
oh
take the Sacred Foundry to
yeah,
find the Ajani.
exactly. You take the Sacred Foundry, or the Godless Shrine, or one of the triomes that has white mana in it as well. It's just like that. That fixing opportunity will lead you to the win condition opportunities
Yes.
that can pass you
And yeah, I
in the
can't
dark.
overstate that there only being one cycle of fetch lands and then so many cycles they could grab. It just you want to pair fetch lands with something else, and there's only the one cycle of fetch lands. So if you could get them, you have to take them.
Yeah, and we talked about at the beginning of this conversation about how snowbally it
Yeah.
is, and the fetch lands is what snowballs your mana, right?
Yes.
I think
And
that's
even besides the mana fixing too, they provide so much additional value. There's so many cards that if you take a fetch land early, will just get better because you have a fetch land in your deck, whether it's Croxan, Uro needed cards, whether it's Grim Lavamancer, whether it's Jace the Mind Sculptor wanting to shuffle. They just do so much for you.
yeah, and there's landfall in the deck as
Yes.
in the cube as well. There's Ren and Six to get
Yes.
back and get
It's
additional value into it. There's Life from the Loam. There's Hogak.
yeah.
Delve strategy. It's just
Yeah, there's so many cards that they just make whatever cards you draft after it better. They they're very safe picks. Besides the One Ring, they are the safest picks in the cube.
so last down on the list, and I think it's worth mentioning here is Prismatic Vista.
Yeah,
And
Prismatic Vista is the safest fetch land. And you're very, very, very rarely not going to have any basics in the deck. And just always being able to find a basics nice. But it is last because the other fetch lands find two colors.
right,
Or in a Triumph, they find three colors, and Prismatic Vista will just always only find you one color. So it's
right.
just slightly worse than the rest of the fetch lands.
But you would still rank it higher than anything in this next
Yeah,
category.
it's just a hair worse than the rest of the fetch lands, but it's still very, very good.
All right, so let's move on to the rest of your list here.
Mhm.
We're looking at good first picks. So about this category, this is
Yeah,
something that is still something. If one of these cards is listed here, but there is no fetch lands and none of the first category,
yeah.
you're still
I'm
going to be
very
okay
happy
taking
to pick those.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. And the first is kind of I mean, she's showing her age a little bit, I think, but still,
Mhm.
still a pretty good card is Lelia.
Yeah,
Uh,
Lilia is used to be one of the best red cards of the cube.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of got worse as time has went on, but still very aggressive. It attacks as a 3/3 haste for three, and it draws you a card every turn.
Mm,
In addition to that, there are some small other synergies like Bowback Courier or anything that exile cards that make Lelia grow. But
mm.
usually it provides a lot of pressure and it keeps your card draw going.
Yeah, kind of like a more expensive, but more damage inducing Ragavan, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they work great together too.
Oh,
You could
absolutely. Yeah.
Ragavan Curve into Lely, and then you're getting two exiles every turn.
Yeah, we're living the dream if we're
Yeah.
able to do that. Kind of on the other side where we are trying to get into later turns, we got Birds of Paradise next.
Yeah, Birds of Paradise is it leaves you very open. I could really talk about all these mana dorks in this category. Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, Noble Hierarch. They all have a slight upside over each other, but I think Birds of Paradise is the safest one.
Mhm.
And they let you snowball. They get you to those powerful 3 and 4 drops early, and it just they're very safe. Every green deck wants them.
Sure. Let's jump around a little bit in this list then, since we're
Sure.
doing so. Yeah, I agree with mana acceleration, getting you to
Yeah,
cast your
I,
turn three
like
play on turn two and everything.
I think there's always something in Magic about 4 mana planeswalkers.
Hmm.
About when you have these 4 mana planeswalkers, that's like the good zone of where they provide the advantage. As that went on, it's kind of got you to 3 mana creatures, 3 mana planeswalkers that provide you big advantage. And these mana dorks just getting them out a turn early. It's in many ways it's almost like a time block.
Yeah, for sure. And I think along those same lines, we also have Chrome Mox on your list as well.
Yeah, Chrome Mox I think is slightly less powerful, but like the One Ring before, it's colorless. So will go in almost every deck and allow you to get to those powerful things early. It is risky though. Like some opponents may have the artifact removal and or they may have Brazen Borrower to bounce it and set you up to be 2 for 1. But in places where you can snowball, it's very powerful.
Yeah, it you do kind of run the opportunity to blow yourself out onto it too. But
Yeah,
I think I think like as far as like something with like Brazen Borrower, you have to know that you are going to turn the corner with that kind of thing because I think a
yeah.
lot of people are going to save that type of removal for the board that to keep themselves for the tempo and sign to.
I would definitely, if I see an early Chrome box, I'd Brazen Borrower it. It's a big tempo play, and it's just the risk of Chrome box is the only thing keeping it out of the first category.
Mhm.
But it's very powerful to skip on mana like that.
I do think before this league, I think Chromox might have been a little bit undervalued in
Yeah,
my cube. I don't think people were taking it as highly as they
it,
necessarily should have. But we have seen
it's not a fun card. It's kind of boring, but
uh,
it's a boring thing that does it just puts you ahead to do your big fun things.
yeah, we've seen Ricky take advantage of Chromox in in a couple of times in
Yeah, it's
on camera, and it absolutely works. It does what it's supposed to
yeah,
do on things. And I think if you have anything, which your deck should at this point as far as modern
yeah,
Magic, in order to get you the value that you're going to lose with exiling that card,
yeah,
whether it's the incremental type of value that something like a Johnny or Bowmasters or something's going to get you some other relevant piece of cardboard or game advantage in hand, you can overcome the initial cost of exiling a card with Chrome
yeah.
Mox.
Most of the good 3 and 4 mana cards in the cube are they get you cards back,
Mm.
and yeah, Chromebox is just it's very nice to get you there.
Yeah. Speaking of getting cards back and stuff, let's go back up the top of the list. It looks like we've got Nadu, which we mentioned
Yeah,
beforehand.
Nadu is one of the most powerful cards in the cube that is held back by I think being a bad color combination.
Ooh,
So I
I know at least one
which
guy who that would be fighting words for.
yeah, I mean if you can build around it, Nadu's great. I think the Nadu deck, you get it, it's maybe one of the best things you could be doing. But if it does not come together, it's one of the highest chances to be a wasted early pick. It's a
Mm.
very high risk pick. High risk, high reward, but there's a good chance it's going to be sitting in your sideboard.
Yeah, if you can't get like the good blue green stuff into it, that could happen. I don't think it's
Yeah.
a completely dead card on its own. Like
I mean,
it's
it's also two colors. I think it's
sure
the first two color card that I listed. So
it
the
is.
top of
Yes,
that, which automatically makes it a riskier first pick than
sure.
any fetchland or monocolor or colorless card. And but it's still, if you're playing blue green, you're always going to be playing it. And if you get the Nadu deck, it's extremely strong. But it's just the risk of taking a two color card early.
Yeah, but you have this in the good first pick column.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's high risk.
okay,
When that risk pays off, it's very very good.
all right.
But like if it was one color, it would be the best card in the cube.
Uh, and here's another one of my favorite cards in the cube,
Yeah,
getting value back, and currently one of my favorite Magic cards to put down on turn two is Psychic Frog.
yeah, Psychic Frog, like Nadu, it's two colors, but
Mm.
it's so powerful. And I think it's a little easier to build around than Nadu, but it just gives you so much value. It's hard to block it.
Oh yeah,
If you, they don't have an early answer, it takes over the game, and then it things like Reanimator, it gives you great value for that. Just letting you bin cards and bring them back.
sure, and draw you cards in
Yeah,
the when I get into. Yeah, as much as I love Psychic Frog, I think I would have a hard time, or I wouldn't. I might first pick a Psychic Frog, but I don't think I'm going to be super happy about it because I know if I'm going to keep with this, I'm going to have some work to do.
um, yeah, but blue and black, they feed it very well.
Mm.
There's besides the Reanimator, just bouncing stuff or removing stuff make it, if they only have one creature out that can block it, it makes your removal into drawing a card too.
Yeah, I don't doubt the power level of the card. You know, this
Yeah,
I've cast it a ton of time.
yeah,
This is my current modern deck
yeah.
as well. Yeah, is the Psychic Frog deck, but it's
It's also
I think yeah, we were talking yeah, because it's two colors, I certainly value being open
yeah.
as well, especially when I'm in the first pick that I'm taking in a
It's
cube.
a lot like Nadu, where it and Nadu are both the power level of the strongest cards in the cube,
Mhm.
but being two colors makes them a riskier first pick.
Yeah, but I think with Nadu, because one of its colors is green, I might lean more toward favoring Nadu over Psychic Frog in a first pick because I'm
They're
gonna have
very
the
close.
yeah, I'm gonna have a little bit more opportunity for mana fixing and acceleration in green.
Yeah, but Psychic Frog, it is a two drop.
Mhm.
It does well with what black and blue do well in the cube,
Absolutely.
which is bouncing stuff and removing stuff and playing tempo. And then if you want to go into combo, it feeds that well. But it's
Yeah, I like the Psychic Frog. I like the card more in
yeah.
terms of the draft. I like if I like picking a green card to keep myself open longer. I think that's
Yeah.
ultimately what I'm getting at. But that's you know
Yeah.
I'm
It
happy to
could
have any card in any of those in my
yeah,
deck for sure.
it's there's always gonna be personal preference too. I think it's a very powerful card that just takes over the game if
I,
it's not answered.
I'm not going to pass it if I have black or blue
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my deck already. That's for sure. Um, One card that can keep you open for a long time, another colorless card, Smuggler's Copter.
Yeah, Smuggler's Copter, it's almost the opposite of the two cards we just mentioned, in that it's a little weaker than most of the cards in the category, but just being colorless, it goes great in the red aggro decks, it goes great in the white aggro decks, and then in any of the discard synergies or reanimator, it does that too. It goes in very many decks, and it's a low chance it's going to be sitting in your sideboard.
Yeah, it really does everything uh, that you could possibly want in a vehicle, which is
Yeah,
a little antithetical. You know, where if you're drafting normally now, you're in Aether Drift, and you know we've got a ton of
yeah,
vehicles into it, and nothing. in Aether Drift comes close to what
No,
Smuggler's Copter
Smuggler
actually.
Copter
Yeah,
is much more powerful. It's much like Skull Clamp, where they made a new card type and made a mistake early on with it,
yeah, yeah.
and it just goes in so many decks, and it lets you keep yourself open until maybe a broken card comes later.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that colorless first pick is very very nice.
yeah. You've got another colorless card in here and another equipment in Umazawa's Jite.
Yeah, Ubisoft's GTA. God, how could I describe this? There's matchups where Ubisoft's GTA does nothing.
Sure.
Like, but in creature versus creature matchups, it is the best card you could have.
Yeah, if you're doing any sort of duke it out on the board,
Yeah,
yeah, there's
yeah,
no, it's going to turn your worst creatures into better than their best creatures
yeah,
most of
and
the time.
gaining life, killing their creatures. In creature versus creature battles, it's the best thing you could be doing. And then if they're playing combo or control, it feels a little silly.
Mm.
But because it's colorless and because of how powerful it is in those matchups, I have it as a fairly early pick that you want to be doing.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to be doing too. And most, I mean, we did have more of a dedicated control deck in our last cube, and it does come up from time to time. But I think
Yeah,
most matchups that you're going to face in the cube are going to be decided on the board.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's a good chance that you're playing creatures versus creatures, and it's very powerful. It makes your creatures harder to kill. It takes out theirs. And then if they're playing mono red or something, it gains you life.
sure. Uh, you got a good way to find him is always GTA on the list too, and Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, Stoneforge, but it's a 2 mana creature, safe. And yeah, finding Stoneforge or finding Ubisoft's GTA or Skullclamp, which we mentioned, but
Mm-hmm.
then it has the combo potential with Batterskuller,
Oh yeah.
and it does a lot of stuff for 2 mana. That
Yeah, I think you can kind of pick up on a bit of a trend of what we're talking about here. Like, if we're looking for something that is aggressively costed that gets you more than one piece
yeah,
of value, a
yeah,
token, a card, a new card in Stoneforge Mystic, or anything that lets you do more than just commit something. If it lets you commit something to the board and gives you a little something more, and if it lets you commit even more to the board, then that's kind of
yeah,
the
yeah.
composition of
I
what makes a good card, right?
I know Jerry Thompson's talked a lot about modern Magic is about who can throw the most cardboard on a playmat.
Sure, sure.
If you have the and Stoneforge gets you additional pieces. In addition to that, sometimes you can do tricks with instant speed or like having Batterskull die, returning it to your hand, and coming back and making another creature.
Yeah, sure. On the cheap with the additional mana advantage that you're going to get off
Yeah,
of Stone for Mystic too. That's what I
and
talked about the combo
it's
potential.
yeah, anything 1 or 2 mana that provides you additional things. It's very powerful. The only thing keeping Stoneforge from the categories before it is that you do have to draft additional cards to make it good.
Hmm.
There will be times where you don't see good equipment, and then your Stoneforge just feels wasted. But there's enough equipment that there's a high chance that it's going to be very good for you.
Right, and that's probably why it's advantageous to take Stoneforge early when you see it,
Yeah,
as opposed to taking it later in the draft or
yeah.
something like that. So that's what
Like
makes it a good first pick, right?
yeah, it is very good to take it early, but the big difference between it and a Johnny is that Johnny's just always good for you.
Yeah,
Stoneforge, you might have to see something later, but there's enough that it's a high chance that if you take it early, you're going to see those things.
yeah, for sure. Um, so let's talk about uh, removal a little bit, and you've got Lightning Bolt really high on the list
Yeah,
here as well. Yeah.
it's one met removal besides the ability to just lightning bolt their face
Oh yeah.
and force it. A lot of new players will like to force the red deck. It's a lot of players first like getting good at cube experiences. I'm gonna force mono red and just attack, attack, attack. Besides that, it's a great tempo play. We'll take out things usually up to 3 mana for 1 mana, instant speed, and just allow you to do your game plan while not going too far off of it.
Sure, and it kind of keeps you open as well, right?
Yeah,
Like lightning bolt goes into any deck,
yeah. Any red deck,
and yeah,
you're always playing lightning bolt.
you're always playing that for sure. And it provides you that answer, like what Bowmasters did for
Yeah,
those super powerful one drops, the Ragavan, the Alciar
yeah.
Pride, the Tamiyo. Lightning bolt was going to take
Yeah,
care of all of those.
yeah, and as we've talked about how so much of modern magic is about snowballing, a big part of that too is being able to disrupt their snowball while still building up yours. And
Mm,
it only being 1 mana lets you to basically mostly keep on your game plan while not really slowing down that much to slow them down.
sure.
Like there's a huge difference between a 2 mana removal and a 1 mana removal, and
Mm.
what it allows you to still develop your board with.
Yeah, if you can get rid of their 3 drop, get rid of their Lelia with a
Yeah,
lightning bolt, then you're going to
yeah,
feel pretty
that's a
great about that
huge
expansion.
tempo play.
Right, right.
Yep.
Um, Speaking of tempo, you got counterspell right here. I feel like that kind of pairs well with lightning bolt.
Yeah,
They do some similar things.
counterspell. Well, a slightly worse tempo play because it is 2 mana. It's just it answers anything,
Mm.
and just 2 mana to take out anything is just very very powerful.
Yeah,
And
that blowout potential is even bigger because
yeah,
it does get anything. So
and
like,
just yeah, you don't have to know what they're playing.
hmm.
You have the counter spell, whatever's good. Maybe they're playing mono red. Maybe they're playing control. Counterspell stops them all.
Yeah, and gives you back that opportunity to find a way back to regain the
Yeah,
tempo to do your thing next,
yeah,
or protect your key piece.
yeah.
And it's true.
It is a little more controlling. It's the aggressive decks aren't as excited to play counterspell, but it just answering everything is very nice.
Sure. Yeah, and the last card that you have on here is the most expensive mana wise card that can't be cheated into play, and that's Urza.
Yeah, Urza, like we've mentioned with Tamio before, there's and Skull Clamp and Ubizawa's Cheat and Smuggler's Copter, there's a lot of artifacts in this cube.
Mm,
And if you do play Urza, sometimes it gets you some mana back. It did. In addition to that, it gives you a big body if you draft Urza's Saga or whatever to get more of these big constructs and what you can tap for mana to keep your snowball going. And if things slow down, just paying 5 to cast a spell for free
sure.
will grind out a game.
So what aside from like Tameo and some of these other blue cards that you've got Urza in, what other cards are you looking for after you first pick an Urza?
I mean, like we mentioned red before, like Urza's great with Ragavan,
Mm, sure.
but or it's there's the artifact archetype with
Yeah, there
Kappa
is.
Cannoneer and
Sure.
all that Urza Saga. But there's enough things that make artifacts that Urza kind of stands above as being able to be found in many homes, and that kind of what makes it a good early pick. Well, like I Kappa Cannoneer is great to get late, but you don't want to risk an early pick on it.
Yeah, I don't think you need a full blown dedicate. I mean, it's great if you can get it, but you don't really
Yeah,
need a full blown artifact deck to make
yeah,
Urza good. You just need
yeah,
a couple of them, and you're probably going to
yeah.
pick that up along the way.
There's
Uh,
enough food tokens or blood tokens or treasure tokens that you probably have artifacts. Maybe you have an equipment and tapping and equipment doesn't make it so it can't be used.
Mm.
That Urza is just going to get additional value for it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite cards in the cube. It's something that I value highly as well.
Yeah.
I think that wraps up your good first pick column
Mm-hmm.
here. So let's talk about fine. Like what
Okay.
can you define what fine is?
Like, I'm not happy about first picking it, but it's okay.
Sure.
Like, you're not excited about first picking it, but it's okay. Like,
These
you're
packs
not
happen.
disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a weak pack. As long as
Yeah.
you get something from this, you're okay.
Yeah. And I think the value of these cards certainly go up depending on, I mean, I know we're
Yeah.
talking about first picks overall,
Mhm.
right? But because that they're in this category doesn't mean that they're bad cards per
Yeah,
se.
some of these are very powerful, but they go into specific archetypes.
Right. And
And
you could be very
there's a
happy. You could be very, my point is you could be very happy taking one of these cards
yeah,
if it's pack two, pick one, and you happen to have already
yeah,
have
or
the opportunity to dive into one of these things.
like I know like Archon of Cruelty is early on in this.
Yeah.
Say you get sometimes you're going to get that, and then the Reanimator deck comes together, and it's amazing. But
Mm,
say you get a Thoughtseize pick one, and then you get Archon of Cruelty pick two, you're
mm.
very happy.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
But it's just a little more risky of a pick for a lot of these.
uh huh. So you mentioned Thoughtseize as being one of the most powerful picks that you can get. What's your thought on Inquisition of Kozilek?
It's great. There is a big difference between it and Nazis
Huh?
because you can't get things like Urza that we just mentioned or Jace the Mind Sculptor, or some other very powerful cards.
Mhm.
But much like Thoughtseize, you can disrupt early game plans.
Sure.
And taking things out, like taking out a Mana Dork turn one, or taking out a Ragavan, or a Tamiyo, or a Janny, or Stoneforge, can sometimes make hands fall apart.
Mhm.
And there is a big difference between not being able to take out the big things or say taking out their sweeper is a big difference between it and Thoughtseize, but still a very powerful card.
Yeah, so something you definitely want to cast early on in the game.
Yeah.
It's definitely a much worse like late game top deck than Thoughtseize,
Yeah.
for example.
It's
Or if you're on the or even if you're on the draw versus on the play. If you're on the play, Inquisition definitely is a stronger card.
yeah, yeah. Like if they cast turn one Ragavan, you don't want to be casting Inquisition turn one.
Yeah, yeah, you want to
But
cast Fatal Push, but definitely
yeah,
not this. Yeah,
but it's still a great card. It can still make hands fall apart, but it has a lot of disadvantages to Thoughtseize.
sure. Um, One card that I actually might disagree with you a little bit. I think this is a good first pickable card. Is Urza Saga on this list?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are very happy on Urza Saga, and
Mhm.
I don't think it has the targets in this cube that it does in something like Vintage Cube. And
Sure.
sure, you get two bodies, but you're also you're putting yourself at risk with an enchantment land, and sometimes the constructs, if you don't have an artifact deck, the constructs aren't always that big and take up a lot of time. And it's a good card, but I just don't think it's as good as the reputation of something like it is in Vintage Cube, where you're getting Moxes and Black Lotus and things like that.
Yeah.
And the artifact decks are a little more fleshed out.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think there is a bit more of a contest for artifacts in the
Yeah,
queue for that.
like the
And I noticed like if we're looking at like some of the best targets for uh Urza Saga, you have ranked higher than the land itself, like Skull Clamp, for example.
yeah,
Or
like if you get a Skull Clamp, then yeah, pick Urza Saga next.
uh,
But Urza Saga, like it's some of the best targets for it are some of the best cards in the cube,
mhm.
and other people are going to take those if they see them.
Yeah, I think like on the remaining lists are kind of lesser uh lesser mana rocks, um, like the Everflowing Chalice, um, but it can get like kind of
Yeah,
baubles
yeah,
like
Everflowing Chalice they could grab, or Chromebox they could grab, but they don't do anything.
yeah, or Mishra's Bauble, Chromatic Star. Mishra's
Yeah,
Restorage Desk is a good target.
yeah.
Sensei's Divining Top, Shadow Spear.
I'm actually not a very big Sensei's Divining Top fan. I think it's one of the most overrated cards in the cube.
Oh yeah,
I think it's you feel good doing it, but it just does nothing so often that when we talk about Magic being snowballing,
mm,
it's you're not. Sometimes you want to just skip doing stuff like Sensei's Dividing Top. I think and just develop your board.
I agree. I think I would want a Sensei's Top in like say the dedicated artifact deck so I can get additional synergies on top of that. But most of the
Yeah,
time, I probably
there's decks for it, but I think some people have it as a very strong card, and I don't think it's there. I think maybe the best Urza Saga target might be Shadow Spear,
sure.
where you make those big constructs and giving them trample and lifelink can get you through.
Mhm.
But I just don't think there's that many strong one mana artifacts that I have it very high.
Sure. So okay, and I was about to ask you this question, but looking at the list, I think I know the answer already. I was going to ask you, would if for your one mana investment, would you rather cast a Sensei's Divining Top, or would you rather just cast Ponder or Preordain?
I rather cast Ponder or Preordain.
Yeah, I'm
Ponder or
right there with you.
Preordain draw you a card,
Right, right.
and
They they do draw you a card beyond just fixing your
yeah,
mana, but they are kind of in the same realm. Um, I'm assuming you would rather cast Ponder than Preordain.
yeah. There, I mean, it's kind of the eternal question between those two. Where do you
Sure.
want Ponder? Where do you want Preordain?
Hmm.
And most often, I'd rather have Ponder because it sees more cards, lets you shuffle your deck sometimes, which sometimes is important. Sometimes you might chase the Mind Sculptor and then shuffle your deck away or something. But they're very close.
Sure.
They're very similar cards. They're both very good.
Mm,
But there's just edge cases where each is slightly better than the other.
right. And it depends on what you're playing, but
Yeah.
they're interchangeable, but just
Yeah,
very good.
there's definitely decks where one's better, but I wouldn't waste your energy on where's especially in cube
Mm,
where they're both about the same and you'll play them both. Maybe in legacy where you only want to play four, you might choose one or the other, but they're both good in the same homes in cube and which one's better isn't that big of a deal.
sure. We touched a little bit on Archon of Cruelty. Do
Yeah,
you have anything more you wanted to add to that?
I think it's the most powerful cheated play creature. You
Mm,
have Through the Breach or you have Reanimator synergies. Archon of Cruelty is the best one. And it's a very powerful card, but the difference between it and some of the cards above it is you have to draft these cards with it to make it good.
yeah, I see that Atraxa is not on your list.
Yeah, Atraxa is it's also very good, but I think Archon is it's just slightly better. Being able to make them sacrifice creatures is often a huge deal with how powerful the aggressive decks are in cube.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, like if they kill your Atraxa when you bring it back, sure you get a lot of cards.
Hmm.
And in some matchups that's huge, but if you have a red deck or a white deck facing you down, you want to be able to hurt their board when you're cheating something out, and Archon does that.
Yeah, Archon does the work as soon as it hits the battlefield to
Yeah,
proactively affect the board. Um, and Atraxa is going to make you work a little bit more to
yeah.
to,
And
to win.
Atrax is a very good card in these Archon deck or these decks too, but Archon's just slightly better.
Sure. Um, we talked a little bit about green blue before with Nadu. You've got Uro
Yeah,
right next.
Uro, it's a very powerful card held back by what I think is weak. color combination.
Mhm.
And it's not great in what the color combination often wants to be doing.
Mm.
Like playing to the board with mana dorks or Nadu or all that isn't really where you want Uro. But say you have a control deck with Ponder, Preordained, or the Fetchlands that we mentioned, and you can splash screen, Uro can take over the game. Like it's a very powerful card. But it has a little less support in the color combination. In many ways, it's an Azorius card in Simic.
I think that's a good way to think about it too, because
Yeah,
I think when we see Uro used, it is in that green blue
yeah,
archetype, and it does feel a little bit awkward and doesn't end up doing
yeah.
a
You
lot. That could,
in decks that you can fill your graveyard with answers or fetchlands or anything, Uro can take over the game, but it's not often that you have that in Simic. It's maybe in a multicolor deck.
I think
And in
Sultai
those,
is a good place
yeah,
for Uro.
Sultai, it's
Yeah,
great. In Bant, it's great.
sure.
But it's a big commitment for early pick.
Mm.
But if it works in those, it's extremely powerful.
Yeah, I think this other Titan you have to work a lot less for because it kind of fits more naturally, and you have Flage.
Yeah,
On the,
Flage.
yeah, it just does everything that you kind of want it to do when
Yeah,
you put it in
and
any deck, right?
Boros is as time goes on, Boros is getting very powerful.
Mm.
And like if you look at the best cards, Regavan, Ocelot, Janny, Fury, Solitude, they provide a nice home for Flage.
Yeah, and I mean that is or was kind of the modern deck of the year last
Yeah,
year.
it's
It
it's
is Boris.
yeah, Boros Energy, which I think is the 2024 Jund of just playing the good cards. And Flage provides a nice bit of value, and it gains you life if you're playing another aggro deck.
Sure.
It's also good in some with blue, like
Mm.
Uro. If you have it in a control deck, it can take over the game late if you're filling your yard.
Yeah, absolutely. If you get to or in a Jeskai control deck, if you're going to
Yeah,
control the board,
yeah,
Blage is going to get you the life that you might need to
yeah,
survive the aggro matchup and then come in
yep,
as just an outstanding
yeah.
finisher
Great
at the end.
finisher.
Yeah, yeah. Very next. Um, this guy doesn't gain you any life. Yeah, Dark Confidant up there. Speaking of
Yeah,
John and those good
yeah.
old days.
I mean, 10 years ago, it was one of my favorite cards in the cube. It's
Uh,
an all-time classic creature that is it provides you card advantage like some of the cards above it, but it's just a little fragile and outdated in 2024.
mm,
But
yeah,
it's
Bob getting Bowmaster doesn't feel good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Bowmaster, it trades with Ragavan. You're going to want to block the Ragavan, their one mana creature with your two mana creature.
Mhm.
But if it survives, it giving you a card each turn and providing a body is still good. It's just not as good as it once was.
Yeah, I think how much if you're first picking Bob here, how much thought are you given to deck construction and keeping your curve low?
Um, quite a bit
Yeah,
because I mean you don't want to be playing a reanimator with it. You don't want to be playing that Archon
sure.
and hitting yourself for 8.
Uh,
But Bob's at his best. Besides just wanting to keep your curve low so that you're not hit, you're wanting to get answers for them with the Thought Seize or the Lightning Bolt that Bob gets, so you can trade resources, and Bob's putting you one up each turn.
yeah, kind of like a little much worse the One Ring on a Stick that's going to
Yeah,
lose you quite a
it's
lot more life. But
a
yeah,
little bit like the One Ring.
yeah. I think definitely an underrated card in the
Yeah,
cube. I like it too, and of course, as a old Jun player,
yeah,
I love Bob
he's a
too.
great card.
Yeah, and uh, Bob can beat down too, right? Like,
Yeah, at two
yeah.
one, and it 2-1. It will carry an equipment. It'll tap for Smuggler's Copter. if you are losing too much life, you can equip it with skull clamp.
Sure, yeah,
But it,
or
yeah, it does
attack
give
with
you a
it.
body.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a great card on that. Sticking with my Jund theme, you got Ren and Six next.
Yeah, Red and Six. It's another very powerful card that I think as people get better at this cube, it's going to get worse. I feel
Really?
like I've been telling everybody to draft Fetchlands,
Mm-hmm.
and as if you're not able to collect all those Fetchlands, it makes Red and Six a little worse.
Sure.
But yeah, Red and Six just taking out Bowmaster, or Ragavan, or Ocelot Pride with its minus ability, along with the Fetchland giving you a free card draw every turn for 2 mana is huge.
Yeah.
But the only risk of it is if you do get it and you don't get any fetch lands, it gets much, much worse.
Yeah. The Prelim 3 video hadn't come out yet. But Bank drafted a Jund deck into it and
Yeah,
made very good use out of Ren and Six, not
yeah,
just from fetch lands, but also from Dredge
yeah,
and being able to put other stuff in his yard.
yeah. If you could get lands another way, if you could get lands in with say Fable of the Mirror Breaker,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's Red and Six. It has the power level of cards above it, but because it's so good with some of the best cards in the cube, it's a little lower rank
Mm-hmm.
because other people will take those cards highly.
For sure. But that this is Ren and Six because it's so aggressively costed of a planeswalker. It probably has one of the higher rates of ultimating than
Yeah,
other planeswalkers because you can kind of get that going. And if again, we talk about snowballing. If Ren and Six snowballs, not only are you going to continuously hit your land drop and get your mana advantage, but he can end you the game too.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to come back from that ultimate.
Mm,
And the minus ability hits some of the best creatures in the cube.
sure. Uh, this card is an interesting pick. I think it's got a little bit of, talk to me about Inti.
Inti, it just provides a lot of value. For one, the red aggro decks can often be chump blocked,
Sure.
and Inti giving your creatures trample is very powerful.
Yeah.
But besides that, it provides value for all the discard synergies,
Mm,
which are like Archon of Cruelty and bringing it back, or just getting rid of bad cards and getting good cards.
yeah. Smoothing out your hand. Yeah.
It's another 2 mana creature that gives you a lot of value in different ways.
Definitely better in an aggro strategy than something like mid range or something there, right?
Yeah, it's better in aggro, but it's good in mid range if you have other discard synergies because
Sure.
NT doesn't just care about his own discard. If
Mm.
you can discard for Fable or any of the
Ah,
other things, and your NT is getting you those cards, it becomes a big card advantage engine.
sure, sure. Yeah, that's a good way to use it too. I'm trying to think what's big that needs trample with Inti.
I mean, it could be an Urza's construct token. It could be Lelia that becomes a 5/5, and
Sure.
NT lets to hit your opponent's face when they have a chump blocker.
Yeah, or
It
Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, it could be Tarmogoyf. It could be
Yeah.
Kappa Cannoneer that you somehow can't make unblockable. Like it could be anything. Like just sometimes providing that trample could be very big.
Ah, I see. Yeah, Inti's good at getting over the tokens that gum up the board, and there's quite a lot of that.
Yeah,
Like Lingering Soul is what
it's
Ocelot Pride can generate.
yeah, it's a card that does a lot in many different shells.
Mm. But if someone's playing those decks and they've got Yawgmoth on the battlefield and it's got protection from humans,
Yeah, yeah,
but
Yawgmoth, great card.
yeah,
What I love sacrifice decks. I'd almost have Goblin Bombardment high, but any Yawgmoth provides card draw, and it can somewhat combo with a few cards in the cube. I forget is Forsaken Miner still
that recently came out. Yeah, yeah,
recently came out,
it
but
recently came out.
many
Yeah,
cards. besides that, take it over the board with minus counters, destroy card. It's a very, very powerful card and somewhat of a weak archetype.
Mm.
Like it's an archetype I like, but and it may not be the strongest in the cube, but Yawgmoth is the strongest card in that archetype. And if you could get him and then build around it, it's still a fine pick. But because of the archetype strength, it's not as high as some other things.
Yeah, as a curator, I try to beef that up recently in
Yeah,
some of the things to bring in more effects like Zulaport Cutthroat is back in the cube,
yeah,
um, and Marionette's Apprentice is in the cube now too.
yeah, it's great with that.
Yeah, so
Great,
there are some things to
and
help out Yaga a bit.
yeah, it just if the card draw from it is very big.
Mm,
And there's so many good things with one or two toughness that Yawgmoth being able to take them out is very nice. And it can be hard to attack into a Yawgmoth if they have any sort of creatures because you could sacrifice those creatures and chump block with them and then give them minus ability to something else. And it does a lot for 4 mana.
it does. Yeah, it's definitely an effect that can't be ignored once it hits the board.
No, it's
You
very powerful, and it's just being held back by somewhat of a weaker archetype,
sure.
but an archetype that I like a lot.
Mm. We got a couple of combo pieces next. The first, probably one of the more popular ones to be drafted, is Dark Depths.
Yeah, Dark Depths is very powerful, but the combo pieces they have the disadvantage of you needing the other cards, and that makes it kind of a risky early pick.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can get Dark Depths and you can build around it, but there's going to be times where you just take that early Dark Depths and you never see these combo pieces for it, and Dark Depths just sits in your sideboard.
Yeah,
It's
it could definitely be hated out. I think with the
yeah,
Dark Depths specifically, though, like I mean, I can't speak for everyone into it, but there's really no point in say taking a Thespian stage
no,
unless you have Dark Depths. So that's a really high risk
yeah,
pick to take something like Thespian stage early on to hope you get the Dark Depths later, rather than taking the Dark Depths now and hoping that you get the
yeah,
Thespian stage later.
yeah. You got to take the Dark Depths early if you
Mm.
want to build around it. But there's going to be times where like you see Thespian stage, or maybe you see Dark Depths and Thespian stage in the same pack,
Oh yeah,
and so and then somebody just doesn't have a pick, so they'll hate out Thespian stage.
yeah,
Like these things will happen in Cube that makes it so it's not as high of a pick as some other things. But if you get the Dark Depths deck, it can be very powerful.
yeah. Because there's so many ways to. I mean, it's such a consistent combo if you can get it,
Yeah,
and it makes it even less fair, I think,
yeah, and
in 40 card formats, right? Because
yeah,
you've got things like Primeval Titan or Life in
yeah,
the Loam or like all these other stuff to get the
yeah,
cards back out of the
yeah.
card.
There's a lot of ways to find it. Knight of the Reliquary is
Sure.
a great piece. I know some people have been hating on it,
Mm.
where it's
Yeah,
not as powerful as it may have used to be, but in Dark Depths, it's very, very, very nice.
for sure. Um, Sticking with combo, we got Kiki Jiki next.
Yeah, Kiki Jiki's a lot of the things that I said about Dark Depths apply to that. If you
Mm.
can get the combo, it's great. But if you can't, some of the cards are not the best.
Sure.
Like if you get the Pestermite, if you get the Deceiver Exarch, that's very powerful, but it's also can be hated out.
Would you, if you had a heavy red deck that didn't necessarily have Pestermite or Deceiver Exarch into it, would you consider putting Kiki Jiki in your deck?
I think 5 years ago I
Yeah.
would have,
Hmm.
but Magic's just too fast now.
Okay.
That like it's a 2 mana or it's a 2 power 5 mana creature.
Right.
That I don't think with how fast Magic is right now, you want to be doing that in like a red aggro deck before, yeah, you could get value from something like Fury in it. If
Mhm.
return it, you can still assemble that, but I think right now you want things that are better at just making them dead.
So
And
how many of those make them dead pieces do you think that you would need? Because like okay, so in the cube uh we've got Deceiver Exarch, Pestermite, we have Zealous Conscripts, and Fear
yep,
of Missing Out.
I if as long as you have something, it's probably worth playing.
Uh-huh.
Like you could still like
So
in a
just
mono red deck with Zealous Conscripts, that's still a combo worth playing.
okay,
Or like blue red with the two pieces,
okay.
sort of combo piece for it. It's just not powerful enough as a value creature.
So two pieces, one piece.
I one piece normally,
Okay.
but you're happy with two piece.
Ah, okay.
One piece, it's like you got to have other stuff too to
Sure,
deal
sure.
with it. You never want to just be attacking with a 5 mana 2/2 haste.
Right. So if I had like one Zealous Conscripts
Yeah,
and then like say I don't know what's a good
if you had
blinkable
Fury
card
and Zealous Conscripts,
yeah, Fury and Zealous Conscripts or Fury and
yeah, you're okay.
Solitude. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe Flage. If you had
Sure.
Flage, yeah,
Well,
something like
yeah, oh yeah, okay. So you make the copy Flage. Yeah, sure. Flage would work too.
yeah,
Um our last card or no, we've got a couple more cards here
yeah,
left on the list too, but you got Craterhoof Behemoth
yeah.
as a
Craterhoof.
fine pickable card.
Um, there was a time where Craterhoof Behemoth was one of the best cards in Cube,
Mm-hmm.
and because you just take the early mana dorks and then you can ramp into this 8 mana creature that just ends the game, and it's still powerful, but it's not what it once was because of how snowballing Magic has gotten. But in any green ramp deck, it's just an I win button for 8 mana usually.
Yeah, and I think that my cube maybe can harken back to those old times a little bit
Yeah,
more than like say the vintage cube because I don't have the commander cards that kind
yeah,
of put things over the
that's
top.
true.
So I think Craterhoof is even stronger in my cube as maybe even as strong as it once was in vintage cube.
Yeah, it's still a very powerful creature, but like I listed those mana dorks high with Birds of Paradise and the Hierarchs and Delighted Halfling. If you could get those early,
Hmm.
and then you have Craterhoof as a something to eventually win the game, and you can play differently. Like you can start playing a little defensively if you know you have a Craterhoof because you know when you get to 8 mana, the game's going to end. All your creatures are going to get +4/+4, +6/6, or whatever.
Yeah, it makes you like a little less willing to trade off your
Yeah,
pieces on the board because you know that that
yeah.
hoof is
You can start playing defensively and just
mm,
wait it out.
sure. Um, we've got a few last minute additions here to your list that we were talking about here. I'm trying to locate those now.
So,
I imagine Mana Leak kind of feels a bit like Counterspell, right?
yeah, Mana Leak is like Counterspell, but it's slightly easier to cast and slightly worse in the late game
Right.
because if they do have the mana, of course they could pay it. But in a tempo deck or in a deck that's not as heavy blue, Mana Leak just being able to answer anything is very powerful.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a highly pickable card too, and
Yeah,
that versatility of not being double blue is
yeah, it's
certainly brings value to the card.
yeah, it's very strong.
Um, so there wasn't a whole lot of removal on this list outside of lightning, but you added dismember on
Yeah,
here.
Dismember is basically a colorless card that costs 4 mana or costs
Uh-huh.
4 life and 1 mana,
Right, right.
but it's just being able to answer anything for 1 mana is very, very powerful. And I value that you know you're going to play it
Mm,
because it's basically colorless.
mm,
The only thing that holding it back from being one of the very best cards is that you're often paying life, and if there have say a red deck,
mm.
that are very aggressive against you. Sometimes that life can hurt a lot, but just being able to go on any deck is very powerful.
So because it has such a wide range of removal or options of things it can remove, I assume that's why you have ranked it over, like you didn't have like say Fatal Push on
Yeah,
your army.
yeah, because Fatal Push can't go into say mono green.
Uh,
Like you don't have to have any black in your deck, and you could play Dismember,
sure.
mono white or mono red, and just Dismember basically functioning as a colorless card is very powerful, and it makes I value the versatility high in an early pick
Hmm.
that puts it above other things.
Yeah. Um, you also added Delighted Halfling here at the last
Yeah,
minute.
yeah. Delighted Halfling, it's much like Birds of Paradise or the Hierarchs, but it has additional value in making a legend uncounterable. And there's a lot of good legends for 3 mana. You don't have to even be creatures. You could do something like Teferi.
Yeah, right. It could be a planeswalker. Any legend for that. But that can be a bit of a drawback too, right? Because sometimes it could be a mana dork that just tests for colorless mana if you don't have that in
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. It's I have it slightly worse than Birds of Paradise, but slightly above the two hierarchs, Ignoble and Noble.
Mm,
But they all have a little advantage over each other, and I'm generally happy in first picking any of them because
great.
they're going all your green decks and they do a lot. And like we've mentioned Nadu a few times. If you do get the Nadu deck, making it uncounterable turn 2 is a very good start.
Absolutely. And the thing about Delighted Halfling, it's got a big butt, right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
got two
it
toughness
doesn't die to
versus
Bowmaster
it
like the other ones.
doesn't die to Bowmasters or it can block a little bit better
Yeah,
than
yeah,
if
it
you
can
have
at
to do
least
it.
trade in some way.
Mm. Or stops an onslaught pride.
Yep.
Um, well, I think we got through uh your 50 here. Um,
Yeah,
or 50 plus.
yeah,
What
50
what
with a couple honorable mentions.
what the cup for all mentions? Was there any other cards that you wanted to shout out, or you think we got them all?
Um, I think there's a lot. I mean, Kiki Jiki and Dark Depths and Yawgmoth were just things that I wanted to shout out as very powerful cards for an archetype that they're great as like a third pick when you could get these more versatile cards early and then you could later go into an archetype,
Mm,
but they're a little less powerful as a first pick because they have a higher chance of sitting in your sideboard at the end.
right. So there's other cards that we talked about at the end
Yeah,
would be better first picks. Dismember, Mana
yeah.
Leak. Yeah.
Shockland's also a little below this. Like they're fine first picks, but unlike Fetchlands, they are replaceable by things like Triomes or
Mm,
Surveil lands, where there's just no replacement for a Fetchland.
right. Right. Yeah. It doesn't get better than that at fixing your mana.
Yeah,
Um. Well, thanks for chatting with me, Vic.
yeah,
I
yeah. It was
appreciate
nice to
going over this
chat.
list. Yeah. Is there any other advice that you can maybe impart off to like based off of any of the games or the drafts that you've seen on video or anything you'd like to share with maybe new players thinking of getting
Um,
into Cube?
I mean, the main thing is just keep doing it. In
Sure.
Vintage Cube, it's a little different. Like most people learn how to draft mono red aggro, mono white aggro, and green ramp. It's like 3 beginner starter decks.
Mm,
But as Magic has went on, you just want to try and keep your curve low, try and keep cards that are good in every deck. That's why I value fetch lands high. That's why most of these are 1 or 2 mana, and just keep yourself able to answer everything, and you'll learn from experience.
yeah. So take the good cards that are cheap,
Yeah,
take
I
fetch
think
lands highly,
yeah. There
build up
there
from there.
was a time where the cube was less powerful,
Mm,
and you had like Cube All Stars, like Recurring Nightmare, Upheaval, that were very popular. But I think as modern Horizon sets have came, Cube decks look a lot like constructed decks in other formats. These cards are just so powerful that you wanna play them and you want to snowball with them.
absolutely. I think that's the key takeaway. If you can do anything onto it,
Yeah,
is like make sure that each of your picks are going to build up into an unassailable strategy, whether that's like super
yeah,
heavy on combo, like with Nadu, or just creating a board presence that's going to get
yeah,
your opponent dead.
yeah.
As
And always, you like any Magic, the person who uses the most of their mana is usually going to win.
sure,
If you could go 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, or 1 drop and then 2 1 drops again on turn two, you're you're gonna usually run over the person that's taken a turn off because they have nothing to cast, and that's what makes drafting these low cost cards so powerful.
yeah, find a way to spit out your hand and play more
Yeah,
cardboard and generate more
yeah,
cardboard
yep,
than your opponent, and
yeah.
you'll find a successful strategy.
If you put more things on the mat, you're probably gonna win.
Great. Let's leave it over there, Vic. Thanks so
Yeah,
much
yeah. It
again
was
for,
nice chatting with you,
yeah,
and
good to chat with you too.
good luck with everybody in the Cube League. And hopefully, I'll be in the next one. We'll see how it goes.
yeah, we'll have to get you in for season number 2.
Yep.
Yo, thanks again,
Yep.
and join
Yep.
us for the next one sometime. Thanks, Vic.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.